Hello, everybody there. كل عام وانتم بخير.
انت بخير دكتور.
Okay, we'll start with the article استشراق ما قبل المعاصر. And have you read both articles? And do you have any thoughts, preliminary thoughts? Any questions? Just to start off the discussion. Any ideas? Okay. No? Okay. All right. So we begin then with الاستشراق ما قبل المعاصر. When we read the title, شرقنة الشرق المعرفة المأزومة. What does شرقنة الشرق mean? What do you think it means? I'm unmuting you also. You can. Anybody wants to say something? Okay. طيب what is شرق in yes, it's not reform. It has to do with reconstruction.
Reconstruction. Okay.
Of who, what the East is. How do you think this is a power relationship? This is politics and power.
How do you think this is politics and power?
I've unmuted you also. If anybody can jump in and say something, or you can type on the chat.
Okay.
You can think of. You can also think of settler colonial. Frontier. And Okay, do you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we start with this. Sharqan al-Sharq. Okay. The term assumes that there's a sharq, there's an east, an objective east, and then there's sharqana, easternizing the east, which is in a way designing an east suitable to someone, but not necessarily the objective east. Okay. And then the power relationship is that the one who defines the east is the one who has control over the identity of the east. If I'm from the east and I accept the one who designs their version of what I am as an Eastern, then I have become dependent on the one who designs and defines me. Yeah, in the knowledge, in a more knowledge aspect or dynamic, it means that the one who analyzes your past and therefore defines or characterizes what you are and what you are facing in the present, has control as to what the prospects are for the future. Okay, if I am going back to my past, getting what is beneficial and then kind of discarding what is not, learning from it, and to understand more about what the present is for me in the East. Therefore, I can make a projection for the future, which is based on my analysis, which is supposed to be more objective and authentic, and therefore my future is also authentic or objective. The power relationship in Easternizing the East or the Orientalizing the Orient has to do with the one who analyzes the past or my past in a particular way, which serves the interest of making them appear to be more powerful and me to be more unorganized, disorganized, incapable of rational thinking, incapable of containing emotions, and incapable of therefore advancing from present to future. So this is kind of what Edward Said was trying to unpack and to reveal what the institution of knowledge of the Orient means and how it works and how it promotes its narrative, through the meanings and what the terms and the assumptions that are built on. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going into complex analysis in the 3 pages. So you need to, if there is something that is not clear, let me know from the beginning so that we don't go on and some are left behind. Okay. Wait, let me check. Any questions so far? Okay, is the sound is the sound on? Okay. About yeah, it is who has power to define the other. When we're talking about defining and reconstructing, but it's not reconstructing just the appearance and the characteristics. It's reconstructing also the history. And what if you reconstruct someone's history, then you are able to reconstruct how one analyzes the present. If you are able to give an interpretation of what the present is based on somebody else's history, then your future is somebody else's future, but you are practicing somebody else's future. So your future is not your own to claim. Yeah. Let me just go. You've heard of Orientalism art? When you have the chance. Okay, if you do, okay, now I'm going to switch a screen which has for a painting, and then we'll see what you can get from it. Okay, here's a painting. Can you see? Okay. I'm opening the mic so that you can. What are your first impressions? What do you see? Either by chatting or by using the mic.
We can see two mosques, and some people are praying above their homes.
Okay, all right. The mosque. There are two minarets, or three. 1, 2, 3, and then there are more here and more in the background. Okay. And yet, what do you see? You see people praying where? On the rooftop. Yeah, yeah. So what are your first impressions? What do you deduce from the picture?
I have two ideas. Either the mosque are full, or the people did not went to the mosque and they prefer to pray above for some reason.
Okay. And all right. So they do not. The painting is not done inside the mosque.
Yes.
It's done
and
from the rooftops.
Yes, and maybe that's because they cannot. The painter did not have the chance to get into the mosque.
Yeah.
So he want to reflect or imagine how it is inside the mosque, but show the people the way they prayed above the rooftop, maybe because they cannot enter the mosque.
Okay. Now, if you want to, okay, what else can you analyze from it?
I can share something, Doctor.
Yes.
I'm saying that there is the Imam, and each one of them praying in different way and praying. I think the concept is an Islamic concept, and you can tell it's the East. But
how do you know it's Islamic?
Because of the mosque, and they are praying.
Okay, that's if you know this type of prayer. But if you don't know this type of prayer, what do you go by?
From the way they're wearing, that you can tell it's the.
You can also go to maybe Mongols in Asia, and they would have some sort of type of wearing, which is could be like this. You see the moon, the hilal. And therefore, the moon kind of, if you didn't know what the minarets are and what they are extensions from. Wait one moment. Where did it go? If you didn't know where the minarets are,
you will know them.
He kind of does three things. First, if you are aware of the type of prayer, then it is Muslim. If you are not sure, then you have the minarets. If you're not sure, then you have the hilal, the crescent. Okay. Okay. So when they pray from the rooftop, what does it? I mean, it is about prayer, yeah. And you have somebody at the front who's supposed to be leading the prayer, but everybody behind is not following the organization. So what does this? What's your first impression? One of the impressions is that what?
They are divided in the way they.
No, if you are in this region, from this region, you can understand that when at what occasion this type of scene would happen. Yeah, which is when?
Ramadan?
No, no, it is not. It is not Jama'ah prayer.
I think it's
it is more. Wait one. Let me just try to get it back. It is not a collective Jama'ah prayer. It is not a formal prayer. It is a sunnah, yeah, sunnah qabliya or sunnah ba'diyya. Okay, you see this? Hang on. Okay. You see the painting again? Yeah? Okay. So it is a prayer which comes after the formal prayer or before, and that's why you can have this unorganized. Okay. Now, but if you're looking from the outside, this is your first impression of what the East is. Then what is your first impression about the East? I've unmuted you all. So if you have any also chats. Okay, Muslims.
Maybe I can add something, Doctor.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, just because I have read the material, the two articles, so I find that the Orientalism discourse is based on to show that the East, they have different kind of beliefs or religious groups, and each one of them, they have their own identity. Like we are a collective, like there is a different groups, they practicing different way of their own belief. Thank you.
Okay, no, it's much deeper than that. It's more serious. It's more complicated. Okay, I'll try to explain. This is supposed to be the leader of the prayer. Everybody else is not following him. Maybe only one who's maybe raising their hands. The other one already has knelt. The other one is sitting. One has finished and has their hands behind their back. The other one is on the way, and one is on either kneeling down or kneeling up. And then you have on the outside or far away on other rooftops, you have other people. your first impression is that, okay, this is prayer, which is supposed to be the most sacred, one of the most sacred times of religious practice. And yet, at this very sacred time, you have misorganization. You have fawd. So therefore, even in the aspects of being unorganized and unable to be organized is that first, that they are outside the mosque, they're not in the mosque. Two, they are not in line, except maybe the first line. Then there's one behind. Three, everybody's praying at a different tempo, different time. Okay, and this is the evening prayer. So normally, if prayer is important, then you would be more disciplined with it, and therefore there would be a group prayer. Here it means that you can break up the society even in their prayer. If they are broken up in their prayer, they can be broken up even further in other aspects of life other than prayer. And this is very political. Okay. Now, if you're from this region, you understand that this could happen. Yes, if it's too crowded in the mosque, and if it's an evening prayer, say and everybody is praying, and therefore everyone is preparing for the prayer. Okay, but you know that the sun is still up. You see, there's still sun. So if you are from the region, or you know what the timings are, this is the ما قبل الغروب. Yeah. بالتالي it is before the Salat al-Maghrib. It is not the Salat al-Maghrib. So even the artist here kind of, in a way, betrays what they're trying to portray, is that this is before the Maghrib, and it is not the Maghrib prayer if you are knowledgeable about the prayers. But yet the focus here is that he chose to make the painting at a time before the formal prayer. Okay, which is when there could be prayer, individual prayer, which is not organized, because the Maghrib has not still come yet. The Maghrib means that there is no sun. There is light, but there is no sun still present. Okay. The other aspect is that organization is not important. Time is not important. Where you are is not important, even in prayer. So if you are from this region and you know the practices, you would know that this is a prayer before the Maghrib. People are congregating, gathering waiting for the Maghrib. But if you know the details, you know that that prayer at the Shafaq is not Hamid. It is not advised. When at the end, just when the sun is setting, or just when the sun is rising, it's either before or after. It is not when. And even the Dhuhr shouldn't be when the Dhuhr is Dhuhr, when the sun is in the middle. It should be right after, in the middle of the sky. Okay. So if you know these details, you know that this is not the formal prayer. But this is the title of the painting is the evening prayer. Okay. Now, so what has been done to kind of if you dissect the painting, it is a truth in a particular time, in a particular setting, which has been taken to be the representation of the whole context of truth with regard to prayer in this region. So this type of prayer is portrayed as the prayer of the East, which is leaderless, even though there is a leader. Nobody listens to the leader. So you have kind of if you look at the body language, you have this one who is kind of wearing a dagger and has the hands behind their back, which is kind of a gesture of defiance. So they defy authority. And another form of defying authority is doing not what the supposed leader is supposed to be doing. So therefore, you have a complete social interpretation, socio-political, cultural interpretation of what the East is about. And therefore, where are the weaknesses which you can exploit to intervene and reshape the knowledge about the present? How are you with me so far? Anyone has not understood? Okay, so one point is that there in orientalizing, some truths are taken but misrepresented in a way that serves so. So you cannot say that they are not telling. They are not. This is not. This doesn't have an aspect of truth. There is some truth in it, yes, but it is not representative of the whole prayer. It is one section of the prayer. If you unpack it, you understand what this context is. Now, if you want to build a political agenda on this, then you kind of say that the people who are following this religion do not think of their religion that seriously because they cannot organize themselves enough. Okay, and also the people of this culture are not serious in organizing themselves, and therefore they need somebody else to lead them. And the one who is designated to lead them is not from this sort of context and culture. It is from a culture that is organized, scientific, very serious about their agendas, and put the effort into making it perfect. Okay. Now you will have other paintings which are kind of drawing on the instincts, the basic instincts of the human instincts of people, and therefore it becomes more of an imagined. The Orientalist paintings become more of imaginations of the West, of how they think the East is. And part of the East, which is what Hull will talk about, is that there's this romanticizing and also very Ghara'izi filled interpretation of what the East is. And therefore, if you want to fulfill your basic instincts, you have to go to the East, whether it's doing violence, controlling other people, or economic interests or power or whatever, or male domination. Right. Now we go back to the article. Okay, so شرقنة الشرق, it is redesigning the East so that it has a particular context, it has a particular meaning, which is not necessarily objective about the meaning or the context of the East itself. طيب تتكثف الأسئلة في مشروع نقد الاستشراق بشكل متشابك يعيد التساؤلات الأزلية إلى ثقل اللحظة وإحراجها، ويضع النتائج الإنسانية العظيم في ميدان تأطير العلاقات بين الإنسان والزمان والمكان والذوات والأفكار والتقسيمات المعرفية لفصول التاريخ، بدأت بالابتكار ومرت بالنضج وعايشت المقدس. Okay, so what this is built on, what the components of what Orientalism works on is the human being, الإنسان, الزمان, the time that the human being is in or the people are in, the time being past or present or future, the place, the individuals, the ideas, the classifications and fractions of knowledge about different chapters in history which went through maturity and عايشت المقدس and lived what is holy. ثم خرجت منه برصيد موضوع لا يحمل وهم الخروج من الأحداثيات القديمة ليعاود الكرة بالعودة إلى درجة الصفر في محاولة البدء بدورة جديدة تعيد الإنسان إلى قداسته الفطرية بعيدة كل البعد عن الإنجاز الحضاري في ظل اشتباك دلالة ومصطلحات وغياب رؤية أو نقل انزياحي. What do you think this means? The three lines. الخروج من الأحداثيات القديمة ليعود الكرة بالعودة إلى درجة الصفر في محاولة البدء بدورة جديدة. What is this? What do you understand from this sentence? Okay, there is demolishing the past. What else? I'm unmuting if anybody wants to talk. Okay. Sorry. Oops. Any ideas?
I think
yeah, go ahead, Amal.
I was like thinking about who's trying like the countries who got independent after being colonialized. Like trying to build their own future and to build their own country, but at the same time, the concept of colonial culture and structure and how they build this state controls it and affects its future.
Yeah, but it goes beyond. It's before trying to get rid of colonization. It's actually during the colonial period.
Okay.
And what from the article he begins by saying that it started from the 1300s. This idea of building institutions of knowledge in Britain, France, Spain, and Holland and elsewhere, where the massive, large amounts of material or sources are written, or studies are written, and research is done about the East. But the way it is done is in a way that it kind of, how Orientalism works is that the one who, if the Orientalist, the one who is Orientalist in a negative sense, which Edward Said is criticizing, is the one who projects their own view of the East by using material from the East in their research to reshape the interpretation of what the East is.
Okay.
Now, the Orientalist is the power of the Orientalist and the Orientalized is a bit of, it's a complicated one. It is the Orientalist says that studies the past of studies my past and my people's past. Okay, so they say that I've been studying your past since 1300s. How long have you been studying your past? You can say maybe 50 years, 70 years maximum. But I don't have an institution that has throughout the centuries maintained a consistent gathering of information about my past. So therefore, they have drawn much more profound conclusions about my history than I have. Okay. Now the twist is that they say, like the painting, they take parts of your setting, which are true, but they're true in a particular context, and then they kind of make that as the general assumption that everything like this is like the portrait, when it's just it's a snapshot of a particular time and a particular place and a particular setting. Okay, so if you are not aware, if you are kind of overwhelmed by the amount of literature and studies they have done about, say, my history, okay, and my people's history in this region. Therefore, you say, okay, you know me more than I know myself. If the Orientalized believes that the Orientalist knows more about the Orientalized than the Orientalized himself or herself, then there's a problem. There's a big problem. It means that you do not know who you are. And in order to understand who you are, you need to go to the West to learn how they interpret us. And therefore, based on that, our interpretation of us, we kind of reproduce their knowledge, but we practice their knowledge rather than our knowledge. And therefore, what we do essentially is take their reading of or analysis of our past and put it into understanding our future and then our present. And then what we decide on how to move forward in the future depends on somebody else's interpretation or analysis of our history, of our past. And therefore, if our past is not ours, the analysis of our present is not ours, and therefore the projection of what to do in the future is not ours. Therefore, our past, present, and history are not ours. It is somebody else's interpretation. And the other person's interpretation is not objective, as the painting that we tried to portray, to analyze. The painting is good, is true for a particular time, particular setting, a particular context, but it is not the norm. Even though it could be predominant, yeah, but it is not the rule of thumb. But this is how the Orientalist takes a few aspects of some truths and makes them less powerful and makes them less of meaning, of maybe moral standing, of civilizational standard, and then make that as a complete norm. Which then means the second step after that is that, okay, who's going to sort all this mess out? You have to have somebody from the West, either somebody who knows more, or you need power or force to kind of organize the East, because the East cannot organize themselves even in prayer. Okay, So, but in order to do that, the Orientalist has to discredit, criticize, and lay baseless and without foundation the original, any history of the past, which is from the region, and therefore the Orientalist builds a new past based on destroying what is objectively the past, or objectively an outcome of civilizational progression. الإنجازات الحضارية لازم تصفر وتغيب حتى يتم بناء إنسان جديد. ماشي. والحجة إنه مش وإنسان جديد يعني في الشرق اللي مش معرفيا متطور، إنما مقدس الفطرة الغرائز. ماشي. بالتالي إعادة تحويل أو تصنيف الإنسان الشرقي بأنه هو غرائزي، حتى لو كان مش غرائزي أو بنى حضارات، بدك ترجع للنهج الغرائزي والفطري الفوضوي الأناني، التحدي للسلطة، حتى في الأمور المهمة ما بتقدر تسيطر، أو ما في جدية، مشروع جدي للتطور. ليش؟ لأنه ما في قدرة على التفكير العقلاني والمنطقي والاستنباطي، وبالتالي كل الأمور اللي انبثقت من الثورة الصناعية والفلسفة الغربية مش موجودة، وبالتالي كونها مش موجودة ساعتها لازم بيتم تعريف العنصر من الشرق أو إعادة تعريفه بأنه فطري غرائزي بعيد عن أي شيء له علاقة بالحضارة، اللي هو يعني له علاقة بالتفكير العقلاني، بالإنجاز المعرفي، بالرقي بالعلم، بالعمارة إلى آخره. طيب. Any questions so far? And I've opened the mic if anybody wants to ask a question. Okay, we go then to the next, to the third paragraph of the page. وتكفي الإشارة هنا إلى بيانات هانتينغتون. We're going to read Huntington at the end of covering Orientalism. إغلاق الباب خلفها، وهل يمكن بالتالي اعتبار مفاهيم هيجل إلى آخره مفكرين مع التفاوت زمني ومفاهيم بينهم، الذي قال بإفلاس الفلسفة ونهاية التاريخ الذي هو أوروبي ضمن الاستشراق وضمن الفلسفة المعاصرة في كثير من جوانب. What does this mean? End of history because from the European perspective, ضمن an Orientalist or within an Orientalist narrative or discourse.
Well, I would say the end of history is a biblical term and also a philosophical term that concerns Christians and to some extent Jews as well. But given what Hegel said, I would say that just as the Africans are considered out of history, I would say also the same thing applies for Arabs through Orientalism. So I don't know if that is correct.
Well, in a way, it has to do with something that is biblical, or something that goes back to kind of religion reference, is that the end of time is, or that there's no, in East there would be no time, and therefore history would be non-existent because there is no time. Okay, if you portray the East as being insensitive to time, and then time as being also cumulative, and therefore time with experience also being cumulative, therefore you kind of assume then that therefore it's just the time just repeats itself. It doesn't go anywhere. It's non-linear. doesn't go in the line of progression. Okay, it is just there. Whereas time in the East, in the West, is more purposeful and and organizes and produces. Okay, if you go on the philosophical level, it means that if the end of history in the Orient, in the East, would be then that there is no history for the East to make, because the one who has already decided the history, the present and the future, is the West, and therefore the Orientalist agenda is, part of it is to kind of nullify any validation of history in the East, and say that we have analyzed your history since centuries, and you have nothing that compares to our length of analyzing you, and therefore whatever you analyze within 10 years or 20 years or 50 years or even 100 years cumulatively does not weigh as much as the 7 centuries of analysis. And therefore the claim to history, the West, the Orientalist would say that we know your history and your future better than you know you yourself. And therefore, essentially, your history is what we make it. Your history is what we make it, and your future is what we make it. And therefore, the Orientalist is essentially, with regard to the Eastern human being, is nullifying, if not destroying, agency of people in the region, taking claim of their future based on their experience of the past and their lessons that they've drawn from the past in terms of analyzing what the present problems are, and therefore where to go in the future. Now, this assumes also a religious connotation, in that if you need to discredit a whole region and the history of a whole region, you need to also discredit their religion. So therefore, we come later on how the Orientalist deals with Islam. They do not term it as a monotheistic religion. It is determined by the person who carried who people followed, Muhammad, and therefore the term they use is Muhammadiyan. Yeah, and this is very problematic when you come. It's not offensive if you are from this region, because if you believe that Muhammad was a prophet, therefore there is a message, and therefore the following has a greater good, a human good. If you are Orientalist, to say that the people followed an illiterate who fooled everyone, and therefore all that came out of this region is fallacy. And the claim to the truth is only in the Judeo-Christian version of what revelation is. Okay, and therefore it not only goes to the past tense, it also goes to the spirituality of what the past was, and lays claim that the authentic representation of revelation is Judeo-Christian Western version, and that anybody else who claims a future according to revelation is doomed. And we shall come to that later in the next page. And therefore, this kind of agenda, whose revelation is more authentic, or has more bearing or more substance, has to do with then who carries humanity, the future of humanity, and the best well-being of humanity. وهون صفي we come back to لعل هذه العودة التنازلية تسمح بالقول العام والعريض أن لغة أي ثقافة لا تعكس الواقع، بل تخلق استنادا إلى بنى والحدود التي تسمح بها تلك اللغة. So here he's saying that the language itself does not create a reality. Yeah, but what Orientalism tries tries to do is through its discourse and narrative to create a reality which is not accurate for domination purposes. Domination not necessarily using relational force, but usually also structural power, like knowledge, and knowledge being the primary component, which then leads to economic dependency and all other dependencies. And he comes back to zaman wa makan. Who controls the interpretation of the place and the time has control over a whole people. ويرتبط كذلك بشكل الفعل المعرفي. هون it's interesting that you use الفعل المعرفي, the knowledge of knowing, the activity of knowledge production. مع هذه المتجاوزات الأخرى ومعنى الرغبة الاندفاعية والمبررات للاكتشاف. الرغبة الاندفاعية والمبررات للاكتشاف having to do with the Orientalist. The Orientalist drive towards discovery is kind of wanting to get out of their context, but also wanting to experience the basic instincts. So therefore, part of the discovery has to do with is instinctual as well as other motivations. لأنه عندما يدمر الفعل الناشئ عن الرغبة من أجل إغوائها. And therefore, when like when we talked about the frontier shaped the settler colonial, and therefore what they did in the frontier in terms of taking control of land, decimating wildlife and people, that becomes a way of creating and visualizing what it is to be expanding beyond the confines of where you are. And the desire to find out what is out there has also reshapes what is out there based on what one is desiring. So therefore, you're not objectively trying to understand new explorations as much as you're trying to express your desires in the new realities or peoples or frontiers that you are taking control over or trying to control. يبتدع بديلا عنه في تدمير به, and they're therefore creating an alternate being or identity, which has its own distinct identity from what is objectively East. وتحويل واقع آخر غيره إلى واقع الخاص بواسطة هضم وتبطين واقع غريب أو خارجي. And therefore, taking in the new reality of what has been explored and expanded in terms of the geography or discovery, and internalizing it according to the Western interpretation, so that it becomes a Western realization and knowledge production, rather than something having to do objectively with what has been targeted under the pretext of discovery. When we go to the second page, we're reading a very complicated sentence. So طيب هون وأنا الرغبة هو بشكل عام فراغ لا يلتقي مضمونا وضعيا واقعيا إلا بواسطة الفعل السالب الذي يشبع الرغبة التدمير اللا أنا المرغوب وتحويله وهضمه. فالمضمون الوضعي للأنا الذي أنشئ بالسلب هو وظيفة المضمون الوضعي اللا أنا المنفي. Can you explain what this means? Try to think about it, and yeah.
Yeah, is he talking when he says وأنا الرغبة? I'm not sure about this, but is he talking about the phenomenal I in Kantian philosophy against the I of the master or that of the slave in, say, Hegelian philosophy?
I think it's I, the desire. I, the desiring. الرغبة. وأنا الرغبة. هو بشكل عام فراغ. The I. It is in another way. He's saying here is that I, the desire, which I see in what I'm going to discover, and it's the I, the desires that I want to manifest in the discovery or in the expansion into other frontiers. So therefore, it is. In a way, he's saying that the one who is discovering loses himself or herself when they discover, and they go back to their basic instincts and try to fulfill everything that has been oppressed or suppressed in desires in the new region or new people or new place. So أنا الرغبة, I, the desire, is basically empty, and that's why the need for discovery comes out of a desire of or to fill an emptiness which they cannot find in their own society. Okay, لا يتلقى مضمونا وضعيا وواقعا إلا بواسطة الفعل السالب, which does not gather its substance, its meaning, its weight, and its standing, except by الفعل السالب الذي يشبع الرغبة بالتدمير, except by destroying so as to fulfill one's desires, which is the لا أنا, the not me. Okay, المرغوب, the not me that I want. So in a way, this sentence is saying that the Orientalist is sort of, in a way, schizophrenic. There is the Orientalist who is proper and sophisticated in their context, but when they come to the other outside their social or civilizational context, they become other people. They become their instincts. But why do they become their instincts? Because that's what they crave and want. But in order to have their instincts fulfilled, basic instincts, they need to redefine where they're going to as a cradle, حاضنة, for their غرائز, and therefore they redefine the other place based on what they want to be, بالله أنا المرغوب, that they aspire to be, but they cannot be in their own setting. وتحويله وهضمه, and therefore transforming the play where they are trying to control to fulfill their desires, which is not them in their immediate context, because they would either be rebuked or they would have discredited or whatever, or they could even be have legal action done against them. So they superimpose all what they cannot do in their own setting in the new place of discovery. Okay, and therefore they try to justify that you can be the person you are not in your setting by saying that the place you are going to, how would you say, draws all your basic instincts to that setting. So therefore you are not just actively doing fulfilling your schizophrenic other. You're essentially becoming your schizophrenic other, which you cannot be when you're in your own setting. And therefore, what you're doing that in the process is digesting, according to your needs, what you see in other people's cultures and places. And particularly when you talk about the Orient, because there's the antithesis, the religious antithesis, which the narrative is built on. فالمضمون الوضعي للأنا الذي أنشئ بالسلب هو وظيفة المضمون الوضعي اللائن المنفي. فالمضمون الوضعي. So therefore the content of me, which is being created in the negative and by extracting, is essentially وظيفة المضمون الوضعي اللائن المنفي. Is the role of the one that is kind of ejected from the context of setting of where the Orientalist person is. So what have you understood from all this? I'm unmuting, so if anybody wants to talk. And I'm also watching the chat if anybody has writing on the chat. Are the Ana and La Ana are the Orient or Occident? No. No, the Ana and the La Ana are the same in the Orientalist. Now, you can also, if the Orientalist is, the one who is from the East is Orientalized, then it goes through another, the same dynamic but has a different meaning. Yeah, it means that there are two directions of the Orientalist towards the Orient, and how the Orientalist becomes schizophrenic in that sense. And then there's the Oriental who is from the East, how they deal with the Orientalist. If the Oriental from the East accepts all this body of knowledge and analysis and interpretation, therefore, essentially what the Orientalist tries to do to the Orientalized is to break them off of their context so that they become zero identity and therefore assume a new identity, the La Ana, which is Orientalized. Okay, which means then that in order to be Western, if the part of the discourse is that if you want to if you're from, say, this region, the Arab region, and you want to be part of a civilization, the Orientalists would say you have no basis of civilization. You have no basis religious-wise because you follow somebody who is illiterate and he fooled you. And you are also no basis for civilization because you had, even though you controlled maybe at the Andalus for the 7 centuries or 4 centuries, look at where you are now. Yeah, and therefore, and if you want to have a civilization, you should adapt our knowledge of you and our practices and how we did things so that you can advance and have a civilization and have a future, prospects of the future. If the Orient means then essentially that through education and through the formal research and knowledge that the person from this region acquires, if the Orientalists would say that if you want to become advanced, you have to break off totally from your history and past and come and become like us, accepting all the principles of our modernization and advancement, and therefore reconfigure your setting according to how we have done it. Now, where the power is that you have no agency. You become an agent of somebody else's agenda. You are not your own agenda, agent of your own agenda and your own analysis and your own thought processes. And it also means that, say, how at one time I referred to this as even the Orientalized is not just a Muslim. It could be also the Christian who's living in this area. And how that would work is that, okay, you're a Christian and your baggage, your complete baggage is not just the faith aspect, the biblical aspect, it's also the civilizational aspect. And therefore, the Western civilization has produced and modernized based on the principles or extracting from the principles of that faith. And therefore you are in a context of a larger faith that is self-destructing or destroys itself and is incapable of advancing. And therefore you should not belong in this setting. One, or if you want to belong in this setting, you should be representing what the civilization of the West has produced and its icons of success, and trying to impose it on the where you are. And if you cannot do so, then isolate yourself and make yourself as a supra-Western in Eastern Sea, which is which is Orientalist discourse. It is saying saying to the Christians that your part of your faith is your civilizational baggage. It is incomprehensible for the Orientalist that you are a Christian in a Muslim culture. And Edward Said, Azmi Bishara, and other intellectuals who are Christian from the region say, yes, we are Christian, but we are part of the Arab, we are part of the Muslim culture. Our culture, civilization is Muslim, not Western. And the Orientalist would respond and say, but the Western is the monopoly civilization, so you cannot compete. Then that is where then the politics comes in. Who's referencing who, and who is claiming or assessing the other. Okay. So ربما تفيد المصطلح. Now the Orientalist discourse becomes even more devastating or damning, not devastating, damning towards the Muslims and the culture, because it questions not only the faith, but it categorizes Muslims as being part of a particular lineage of the Ham, not the sons of Noah. You had Ham and Sam, and the Ham killed Sam, and therefore Ham is by biblical script, and therefore by interpretive divine decree is damned until eternity. And therefore everybody who is successing, who is the successor of Ham, and the Orientalist discourse would have Muslims and all Africans and also all non-white as being the successors of Ham, and they're doomed in this lifetime and in the next lifetime. So if you kill them in this lifetime or contain them in this lifetime, it is part of you're doing divine work. Okay. Which then justifies massacres and all by simply categorizing them as being you're already damned, and therefore I cannot, whatever I do doesn't increase your damnation. It actually speeds it up. اللي هو الكنعاني. We talked about Kan'ani when we referred to Patrick Wolf and the Kan'anization, what it means. طيب ربما تفيد مصطلحات الهضم الخارج التحويل اللا أنا في تسريع محاور مع هذا العالم الفكري الذي فتحه إدوارد سعيد في الاستشراق لرصد رحلة المنهج المعرفي الأوروبي. So therefore, what Edward Said was doing is tracing the knowledge approach, European knowledge approach of the Orient or the East من خلال اللغة والخطاب, by controlling language and narrative, discourse, من خلال العقل بوصفه أداة للتفسير وللتقويم, and therefore by referring to the mind as being a means of interpreting and evaluating, والعلاقة بين المعنيين المذكورين في هذه التجربة, and establishing the linkage or relationship between the two in this experiment or practice, التي تبدو في بداية مجموعة من العلاقات الفوقية والنفعية والاستغلالية. So when you go beneath this kind of evaluation and interpretation, it has a dominating or domineering agenda in it. Okay, بين الداخل وهو المؤسس أو المؤسسة التي تملكه السلطة وبين الخارج الذي هو الهامش. So what is inside is what is knowledge that is institutionalized in, say, institutions of learning, universities and the like, and the outside, the kharij الذي هو الهامش, which is the periphery. وهو هنا الشرق, which is the east. وتترسم حركة العلاقة بينهما بممارسة القوة. And therefore this is kind of visualized or kind of seen in a relationship which is a relationship of power, of master, of having mental capabilities, rational West, and how you kind of show the achievements. So therefore, قوة, the power to manifest Western power, that the West is the master of knowledge, not to the East, that the West has a mind and the East is all is instincts, and therefore the West, who has a mind and who cannot be instinctive, goes to the East to be instinctive. And the Gharb is the reference for all civilization, even though they would suggest that there is a schizophrenic aspect to it, but that they would need the East to kind of live out the other la'ana, which they aspire to manifest, but which they cannot manifest in their own setting. Al-isti'rad, and then to show to parade and to show what they have achieved with all the accomplishments. Mu'ajibat al-Sharq, which stimulate the desire and the curiosity of the East. عند الغرب تعني الحالة الصورة عكسية. In the West, the image is opposite. أي كلما تم هضم ذاك الشرق أصبح الحالة الغربية أشد صلابة ووضوحا. So the more the West is able to digest the East, the more the East becomes more familiar to the West. Now, what it means also is that the more the West digests the East, the more the East becomes alien to the East. Okay? Because then it becomes a Western version of the East. وهذا هو ما حاول إدوارد سعيد رصده في نقد الثقافة الغربية. And this is what Edward Said tried to gauge and follow up in when he analyzed the whole intellectual production of the West about the East, which gives it strength and momentum and power, and clarifies its identity عندما وضعت نفسها موضع المعاكسة في الشرق باعتبار ذات بديلة ثانية من تحت الأرض. تأتيه من تحت الأرض. This is this is also very important. Can you kind of okay, first of all, are you still with me, or has anybody not gone lost? This is very dense analysis for one session. Everyone okay so far? Because we're going much deeper in these two sentences, and I need to make sure that you understand what we've done before so far. If not, don't be afraid, don't be shy. Just say you haven't understood something, or something doesn't. Okay.
I think he's saying that in this context, Europe's validation of itself comes through negation of the other. In this case, it's the Orient.
Yes. But then what is the implicit also as well? This is one level, yes. And then there's another deeper level. Are you with me?
Has the deeper level been exhibited through colonialism? Because, well, Orientalism does not concern me in terms of just talking about, let's say, identities that are trying to negate one another in a sense. That does not concern me. What concerns me is the political ramifications of defining yourself against me, for instance. So is colonialism relevant in this case?
It is very relevant, because this is the ethos behind colonialism. Is that why you colonize? It is to manifest who you cannot be in Europe, whether it's instinctive or property or accumulation of wealth or power. Okay, why you discover is also to kind of vent out whatever you cannot express in Europe, and therefore you have massacres, you have kind of pillaging, and you are not bound by the religious format or behavior that confines you in Europe. You can do anything else. Everything is acceptable in the places of discovery. We're talking about colonization, whether it's the Arab world or the Americas, Africa, and Asia, and Australasia as well. Okay, so we're talking, but why it is more targeted here is because that there's a claim to revelation, the divine reference. Who's more right? Is it the Jews? Is it the Christians? Or is it the Muslims? And therefore, you cannot dominate a region that has claim to revelation without if you cannot unfound the claim of their revelation. And therefore, the whole purpose of colonization is, in addition to the economic and expanding and building modern states in Europe, it is existential. It makes who Europe is today. So therefore, you cannot in Western Europe, you cannot say that the Europeans of today have nothing to do with the colonization period which shaped them. They were shaped, their ancestors are shaped, and their whole context in the current version is shaped by the colonization, which now they conveniently say that was a wrong time and that was a different time and now we're in a new age. No. You could not have reached where you are now without having that factored into your history. And therefore, if you want to proclaim to others civilization advancement, essentially you're saying that the other people need to find a third people to colonize. And there is no third people to colonize unless you begin to colonize yourself. And that is the third people. You colonize your history and your present and your past, and then your future is also colonized, because then you're internalizing the colonization, which is exactly what the Orientalist wants to do. Because then, if you have subjects in the region you aspire to discover or control, who believe that they are colonized and are practicing their colonization, you've dominated the land and the people. You do not need military as much. Okay, which is and therefore neoliberalism kind of comes from that sort of is a trajectory from this ethos and way of thinking, is that it is Western centric, but it claims that it has no identity. Yeah, but it's Western centric, and therefore, by being Western centric, it diffuses and dismantles the fabric, social fabric of the culture it tries to dominate. But also, one thing I need to explain, and I think I need to, I'll try to switch to video, because I need to draw something so that to explain how Orientalism works in a way. So I'll try now and then we'll see how it goes. I'm going to switch to I'm going to start video. Okay. You should. Okay, good. You see me. Hello. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, this is one session that I have to draw. So bear with me if I'm not good at drawing, but just the idea is that you are with me. I need to explain how Orientalism in a way works. So therefore, if you have two people, okay, this is the Orientalist, okay, and then you have the one from the East, okay. The Orientalist, now the East is say, okay, these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, these are my characteristics, objectively, okay. The West, the Orientalist West would say, okay, I want to focus on 1, 2, and 3, this one, which I see maybe 3, and this is who you are. You are not this, you are this. That I have built from my knowledge of you over centuries. Okay? And therefore, it is selected truths which are kind of made to represent the assumptions here superimposed by the Orientalist Western to the East. Okay. Now, anything negative that you are irrational or you are how do you say, basic instincts, that what drives you is your instincts, is actually not an objective analysis of the East. It is rather all the negatives or most of the negatives in the person of the Orientalist, and therefore the Orientalist is taking the material from the Eastern person, attaching it to the negatives in his or her person, and then repackaging it as being the East. And therefore, what Orientalism is doing is the negative interpretation of the other, the East, is actually all the negatives of the Western in the schizophrenic sense. So therefore, where the negatives in the Orientalist West finds way of expression is in controlling everything in the East. So actually, when the Orientalist is describing the East, he or she is actually describing their negatives, but superimposing it on the East by taking some truths here and repackaging them according to the assumptions of their reference here. Now, the problem is if that the East believes that this is who he is, this is the valid interpretation of here. Therefore, the mind has become Orientalized, according to the Orientalist. Now, where do you break off? How can the Eastern person rebuttal or challenge the Orientalist? But it says that what you are describing is essentially your own interpretation of yourself, but you're superimposing it on me. For example, when you say that the East is more ghara'izi, okay? It's actually your ghara'izi which are superimposing on us, but we coloring it from icons or symbols of our culture to make it yours. if you really understood us objectively, you would see us as an equal human being, not as somebody who is subservient or who could be subordinate to a dominant. Yeah, and therefore, for example, where you have in the discourse. Okay, in our setting, we have the I think I'll finish with this, but the idea, I'll give examples. I'll end the video. In our setting, you would say the Zionist discourse is that okay, we are terrorists. Why? Because we are, and this would be the Palestinians. All Palestinians are terrorists. Why? Because they are violent. Why? Because that is their basic instinct. Why? Because they are from this region. Why? Because this is how this region is built. You have no capability of mental rationale. And therefore, the idea is that you can achieve a rational outcome by mutual or equal standing footing is non-existent in an Orientalist discourse. And therefore, they would also say that, okay, you Palestinians are sending your children to die, and therefore you have no emotional attachment to your children, which feeds into the Orientalist discourse, saying that actually whatever emotions you have in this region, people of this region have, is just passing. It's like the ghara, it's once fulfilled and then it goes. There's nothing substantial or of duration. So therefore, when a mother in this region, her relationship to the child is not one of affection like the Western one. It is one of just إشباع غرائز عاطفية. وبعدين وديهم للتهلكة ماشي الحال. So this narrative kind of is there not only to subordinate and subdue those who are oppressed. It's also to kind of justify that without violence, because we are so disorganized and we do not understand the logic of rationality. Without that, violence is justified, because this is the only way to deal with insurgents, and therefore Palestinians, and therefore First Nations, and therefore Aborigines, and therefore South Africa regarding the apartheid, and therefore also Northern Ireland regarding to the Protestant Unionists in Northern Ireland, and also the Maori in New Zealand, and on an international scale, everybody who is other from us is an enemy, and therefore is deserving of our inhumane treatment, so as to understand who is dominant and who is subordinate. I'm going to see. I'm seeing the chatting messages. There's a question here that does he mean that the East is not Arabian? No, the East is Arab predominantly, but because the Arab is Muslim, and therefore you need to discredit the whole pivot of belief systems in order to dismantle everything else, the civilizational, the capacity of knowledge, the capacity of, if you follow somebody who's illiterate, and therefore, and you believe in him, then therefore, from an outside view, you are actually intellectually illiterate and beyond recuperation or even rational salvation, unless this person kind of adapts and adopts and adapts the body of knowledge in the West, which kind of rehabilitates, but rehabilitates according to a Western-centric perspective. So therefore, this is why it is important, and knowledge is also politics. And there's power. There's a power relationship in how one evolves in terms of his or her knowledge. You have to be the claim. You have to be the one who is making your knowledge or accumulating your knowledge, so that You benefit from other people's knowledge, but you do not become an agent of another agenda of knowledge. Or another agenda which is colonial or neo-colonial or otherwise, under the pretext of gaining knowledge or having knowledge, or claiming monopoly over truth and knowledge. Any questions before we go on? Did drawing? Any questions on my drawing? شوي. So shall we continue? I'm muting this in case you have any. Any questions before we go on?
You hear me, Doctor?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. I add one comment, that is, I see that the mentality is almost controlling the Orientalist vision, but they use their mentality in the way that it's serving their ideology or their politics.
Yeah, which is why,
right?
The Orientalist will claim that I understand your mentality. And your mentality is like this and like this and like this. Okay, which is very deep analysis. But it goes away or kind of it veers to a direction that it makes you okay. If you feel then that you are lacking, you are not equal, because you have a mentality that is not capable of making civilizations, okay, for example, or advancements in knowledge and science. And therefore, which is why when we go back to Tarabishi, you need to understand how you can go much deeper by acquiring knowledge, real knowledge, or kind of authentic knowledge which you built and accumulated by yourself, not just acquired and without processing it internally, especially when it comes to human sciences and social sciences and politics, because everything is a power relationship, even what knowledge you gain. So therefore, you need to be able to process what you are learning, and establish your own conclusions and your own deductions, but not based on your mentality, based on your rational capability. Yeah. So therefore, you challenge your mentality yourself rather than having somebody else come and dissect and prescribe how to break up your mental system. This is how you you liberate your mind and the knowledge that you have therein, and what you accumulate and how you go on with them. So yes, good point about mentality. So what the Orientalist tries to create is another mentality which is Orientalized. And therefore, if the Orientalized person is not aware between the distinction of mentality and rational rational ability to acquire knowledge and produce knowledge, then the person is lost. سهل استغلال والسيطرة عليه. Okay, so you can have people who have very high degrees in certain fields, but they haven't gone beyond their mentality as a whole, as a person, but they've gone beyond their mentality and their discipline by acquiring the rational capabilities and tools and skills of their discipline. But the discipline hasn't impacted their person as a person. So therefore, you can have very, very affluent people, but who are orientalized in their mentality and therefore succumb wholeheartedly or without question to the Western-centric version of history, of advancement, development, and other aspects. اوكي، بدأ الاستشراق رسميا بصدور قرار مجمع فيينا الكنسي 1312 بتأسيس عدد من الكراسي الأستاذية في اللغات العربية والعبرية والسريانية في الجامعات، في جامعة باريس وأكسفورد وأكسفورد وغيرها في الجامعات الأوروبية والأمريكية. طيب اوكي، so أمريكية يعني later on, not in 1300s. But essentially, the idea is that you have centers of knowledge acquisition about the languages and culture and the peoples of the East in main institutions of learning. وبدأت هذه المراكز بالفعل بنسج شبكة من الافتراضات والرؤى والصمت، وصممت الآليات لتجسيد هذه الرؤى والمواقف وفق خيار وحيد، وهو تجسيد وجهات النظر هذه حول الشرق طبعا. So they began to design their assumptions and a network of assumptions which take some truths, but as we began with the beginning of the portrait, take some truths and make them generalizations which serve their interpretation of how and narrative of how the East is. وتعنينا بالتأكيد على من خلال تغلغل لمجمعات الشرق ورحلات آلية لاحقة. So therefore they would substantiate this with expansion towards the East, also travelers who would gone to the East and who would write about their travels and reproduce these assumptions with new information or other details. بالتالي ونتاجه الثقافي في الاتجاه نفسه من خلال تثبيت صفات عامة للحركة الجماعية الشرقية عبر التاريخ. ويقول هون بلفور في تجسيد واضح للعلاقة الجذرية بين المعرفة والسلطة. So therefore there is a dialectical relationship between knowledge and power and authority. So therefore, if you are one of these institutions, Oxford or Sorbonne or renowned institutions, you have claim to privileged knowledge and unquestioned knowledge from other institutions which are not of the same standard. So therefore, any introduction of alternative views is much more difficult to challenge when you have these renowned institutions going back several centuries claiming a particular truth. Okay, and which is to Edward Said's credit was what he did. He kind of analyzed 700 years of discourse, particularly French and British, and came out with revealed the assumptions and how these assumptions build networks of theorizing and reinterpreting and redesigning of peoples and civilizations. And it all has to do with power, the power to be able to dominate these by the West. إن الأمم الغربية فور انبثاقها في التاريخ تظهر تباشير القدرة على الحكم الذات لأنها تمتلك مزايا خاصة بها، ويمكن أن تنظر إلى تاريخ الشرقيين ولا يمكن أن تجد أثرا بحكم الذات كل القرون العظيمة التي مرت بها الشرقيين. بالتالي so one of the claims is that Europeans are able to govern themselves, but in Eastern history you have no instance of people of the East governing themselves. You always needed somebody طاغية or حكم مطلق. So therefore, you always need oppression and absolute rule. Now, if the absolute rule is not provided locally, you can bring colonization as absolute rule. And if you do not have an authoritarian regime or tyrant, you can bring the colonization to colonialism to be the tyrant, and therefore serving a context in which the people in and of themselves are unable to govern themselves, and therefore you always need somebody else to govern them, which is a very Orientalist proposition and hypothesis. Is that, and therefore, in order to maintain an Orientalist discourse, it is in the advantage of maybe the West to make sure that this region is always incapable of governing itself, even at times when it might be close to, and therefore build on the assumption that because you are incapable of governing yourselves, and because you're incapable of rationality and therefore building future and everything that goes with knowledge of the past, present, and future, you shall always need somebody who is more knowledgeable to administer and determine how things should work in this region, and therefore extracting any aspect of agency for the people of this region. Then at the end, we go to إن عملية إنتاج الشرط كما افترضها أطروحة السعيد عملية معقدة تتكثف فيها نوازع ثقافية وعرقية وجغرافية وتاريخية. So therefore, it is a very complicated, orientalizing the Orient is a very complicated and complex intellectual, racial, geographical, historical project. على مستوى التقسيمات الطبيعية، وهي كذلك شكل جدلي لوحدة الأنواع الأدبية أو أشكال المادة المنتوجة حول الشرق فيما يعرف بالأرشيف الذي سيلتحم القيم بالخطاب الاستشراقي المقترن بالمعرفة والطامع إلى السلطة. And therefore, all this complexity of knowledge production and formation has a large body of produced literature and references about the East, which becomes known as the Eastern, the archive of the East, which kind of shapes the discourse and narrative of the Orientalists. Now, some Orientalists can be Orientalist advocates; they know that they're Orientalists. Some can be Orientalists without them knowing, by adapting to the narrative of the Orientalist body of knowledge. بالاستنتاج الذي ساقه سعيد نفسه والذي مفاده أن التقدم الضخم في مؤسسات الاستشراق وفي مضمونها تواكبت تماما في مرحلة التوسع الأوروبي الفريد، فمنذ العام 1815 إلى عام 1914 اتسع مجال السيطرة الأوروبية المباشرة إلى حوالي 35% من سطح الأرض إلى حوالي 85%. So therefore, notice that 1815, you remember, is the defeat of Napoleon in Waterloo, and which is the end of the Revolutionary Wars, and it is the time in which Europe advanced, and those European countries which were able to advance from middle age European systems to modern state systems. It is the 100-year period of the modernization in which this advancement took place when European control of the world, of the globe, expanded from 35% to 85%. So therefore, if you factor into the Orientalist discourse, it means that in order to advance according to the European version, you would need to colonize 85% of the globe, or self-colonize yourself on a scale of 85% of the population, which is not it's not feasible, and it's not does not make sense. So therefore, but this does not mean that. So therefore, according to the Orientalist version, you have no prospects or hope of establishing any form of civilization. If you are from the East, or from the ones who are targeted by Orientalism, no, you need to make your own body of knowledge and develop your own lessons from history to understand your present and to move forward into the future, so that you are able to claim your future by claiming your present and by claiming your past, and claiming agency that you are an actor, not a recipient of other people's, not a consumer of other people's knowledge and agendas and futures and pasts and presents. اوكي، يفتح هذا التوازي بين الفعل السياسي المباشر وبين الجهد الثقافي والمنظم والمتخذ اشكال عده، يفتح الباب واسعا لمناقشه جدوى ومصداقيه التمثيل الاوروبي للشرق، ومن خلال نماذج واشكال سنناقش لاحقا الذي كان فريدا. والمقصود هنا شخصيه المنتج، سواء كان باحثا او ام حاجا ام زعيما سياسيا ام مبدعا ادبيا، ومدى التغيير والتحول الذي أصاب هؤلاء المستشرقين ضمن التقسيمات الزمنية التي لاحقها نقد سعيد لخطاب الاستشراق. طيب، so we go to the can we go on until D15? Okay, because I need there are two paragraphs that we need to go finish. Okay. طيب, we go to the top two paragraphs of the third page. لابد لتوصيفات عدة أن تفترض نفسها لتولد مجموعة من الثنائيات المتضادة. So therefore, intrinsic in Orientalist discourse is the binary, the us and the other, and the us, it has all the positive aspects and the other has all the negative aspects from the us. And therefore, there is no middle ground. There is not or we can arrive at a compromise. In Orientalism, there's always the othering, is always the binary. If you are not portrayed as the exact opposite, you are not orientalized enough. So therefore, the discourse of Orientalism is always that you have somebody who is good, and the other is totally bad. There's no good in the bad, and there's no bad in the good. And if there's bad in the good, if you are West but you have some deficiencies, the Orientalists will say yes, but we're civilized. So therefore, we are ruthless, but look what we have accomplished in humanity, towards humanity. And if you are from the East and you use the same means, they will say that you are barbarian. Okay, and also the Zionists also use this discourse to kind of credit themselves. It's that okay, we did there were unfortunate events that took place in Gaza in the wars, for example. But look what but this is what we needed to do, and they were the ones who forced us to use force. We didn't start on our own. And even if we started on our own, look at what we've done to the West. We produce your medicines, we produce scientific discoveries which you are using every day. So therefore, we have a moral we have the privilege to be able to use this sort of violence by being part of a civilization that is contributing to what you claim as to being your civilization. So this is what the Orientalist tries to cover up wrongdoings But at the same time, if the same wrongdoing is done by the other, it is because the other is evil and bad, not because there's human factors into it. Yeah. ومن ثم في النهاية المعيار شريحة وأخيرا خلق عالم من التميز من عقلين تاريخيين وجغرافيين وصولا إلى الشكل الأكثر شمولية في المركز وهو المركزية الغربية. So therefore you would have two worlds, you have two easts, the objective east and the orientalized east. You have two histories, the objective history and the orientalized history, and then you have two minds, the objective mind and the subjective orientalist mind, and all going back to Eurocentric, Western-centric reference. لذلك فإن فلسفة الإشراق تكونت واستقامت بوصفها معطى من معطيات الممارسة العقلية الأوروبية. So therefore, it is part of the European Orientalism here becomes a part of the Orientalist European mentality. ثم خضعت تماما كونها كذلك إلى المركزية الغربية. And therefore, it became referenced or subordinated to the Western-centric view of history, geography, and mind and knowledge. التي قامت بترتيب شؤون الآخر وفق نظام وأنساق عقلية based on paradigms, mental and structures and paradigms بهدف أن تجد مكانها في منظومة تلك المركزية. So as to establish a place for the East in a Western-centric context. لذا انتزع الشرق الذي هو موضوع الاستشراق أو بعبارة أخرى الشرق الاستشراقي من بنيته الثقافية وأعيد إنتاجه غربيا. And therefore, in order for the West to dominate the East, the West needed to take the East from the East and repackage it as a Western East, yeah, so that it becomes part of the whole intellectual discourse of which is Western-centric. ربط سعيد هذه الفرضيات جميعا ليصيرها في مكون واحد وهو الخطاب. And therefore discourse الذي وجه وأطر هذه الجهود المعرفية لهدف وحيد وجدلي مع المعرفة والسيطرة والاستحواذ. So therefore the purpose of this discourse, which is a power relationship of the minds and of bodies of knowledge, is to control and to control and take control over, absorb what is of the East in terms of politics, political production, social production, military production. I'm not talking about production of goods. I'm talking about production of the whole purpose of the politics, society, and military purposes later on. الذي تعرض له الشرق وهو مفاهيم استفاد منها سعيد في ميشيل فوكو في كتاب حفريات المعرفة والمراقبة والمعاقبة. So Edward Said benefited from Michel Foucault's books about archaeology of knowledge and surveillance and control. وتبعا لهذه التصورات المفاهيمية لهذه التصورات المفاهيمية التي ستقرأ النماذج لاحقا فإن فرضية البراءة المعرفية therefore there is no Said proposes that Orientalism does not represent innocent knowledge. It is not knowledge for the purpose of knowledge. It is knowledge for the purpose of domination. And therefore, knowledge for the purpose of knowledge is objective and is is done for the purpose of advancing the field of knowledge in a particular area or several areas. And therefore, it has a beneficial, it's supposed to have a beneficial aspect. Here, then the knowledge is used to create a narrative or a discourse which strives to dominate for the exclusive benefit of the West, the European West, or the Western more general. يتستبدل بالسلطة والإنتاج والوقوع في دائرة الفعل السياسي بما يتضمن من سيطرة وتصنيف وجيش ومؤسسات سياسية وعسكرية، كما أن الطغيان الخطاب الذي استقرأه سعيد من خلال النماذج التشريقية سيظل الهاجس والفرضية اللذين سيفرضان نفسهما على مدى التحليل اللاحق في الاستشراق. So therefore, he's kind of explaining why this brings about authoritarian narrative with regard to how to interpret, how to analyze, how to view the people, the geography, and the history of this region. When we come to the religious aspect, here, last two paragraphs. Here we are at يعتبر كتاب بارتولوميو ديابلو المكتبة الشرقية محطة مهمة وفاصلة في استشراق هذه المرحلة القرن التاسع عشر الذي انتشره في الوعي الغربي لتكوين أرشيف في الدراسات والقراءات التحليلية لتفسير هذه الطفرة التاريخية الإسلامية. So therefore, in the 19th century, we're talking about the 1800s, the same period of the transformation from medieval European states to modern European states. You had this development of how you interpret the history, Islamic history. وقد كان جهد بارتولوميو ديربليو الذي استشار بمعرفة اللغات. So he was known for his knowledge of languages, Arabic, Persian, and Turkish. حتى ألف قاموس اللغات الشرقية واشتغل بالتدريس. Okay. لقد قام ديربليو تاريخ إلى مهاتين. He divided the history into two. There's the holy, and then there's the مقدس, which is holy, and مدنس, which is tarnished, okay, or blemished. وكان التاريخ الإسلامي طبعا شاهدا على العصر المدنس. So therefore, all the Islamic history and everything to do with Islam is otherized as being the tarnished, because in the Orientalist discourse, if you are us, you're all good, and the other is all bad. There's no in between. So therefore, if you represent all that is truthful in the revelation, therefore the other is all that is untruthful in the revelation. الذي ألحق أضرارا بالمسيحية. And therefore, ويقول في تفسير هذه الرؤى المخاطبة من أوروبا في تلك المرحلة، هذا هو المنتحل المشهور مهمات. This is the swindler محمد. يعني استغفر الله العظيم صلى الله عليه وسلم. But he's referring to the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, so the adjective here is that there's no credibility, and even there is justification for accountability, not just credibility. The accountability of Muhammad Mahmud المؤلف والمؤسس لهرطقة اتخذها لها اسم الدين. What he considers here, he considers that all revelation through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is heresy from Christianity, مسمية بالماهوتية, and therefore they call this Islam Muhammadian, okay, which is an Orientalist term for Islam. It is, and why it is Orientalist is because it refers to somebody who is, by context, untruthful, to say at best, and is also one person without knowledge, without unable to read, or unable to read or write, and therefore was able to fool a whole people into a belief system which is the total antithesis of what is holy in Christendom. طبعا we're talking about Western Christendom. وقد نسبه مفسر القرآن وفقهاء الشريعة الإسلامية بالمهوتية إلى هذا النبي المزيف. So therefore, all scholarship of the Sharia and Islam are referred to this Muhammadian reference, and he's considered a false prophet. Now this is quote from إن هذه القراءة تفجر. So this reading, therefore, end of quote. So the last line is that this reading kind of raises a large amount of questions about how the West beats the East, how the West repackages what has gone on, the history and the developments of the East, and how it discredits the other belief system, not even giving the benefit of doubt that perhaps there is some merit to it. No, it has to be the total opposite. Now, normally, if you were to examine beliefs, you would try to understand the belief system from within the belief system, not from superimposing one's view on the other by predetermining that it is false. In scientific discovery, you always have something could be true or something could be false. Okay, it cannot be just you cannot predetermine that something is false and then build a whole body of knowledge about a supposition of just one possibility is that it is false. Why? Because it has to be false. It cannot be true. This is illogical. This is illogical in scientific analysis or knowledge exploration. You be objective, and then you see what are the misgivings. You do not build a premise and then build a body of knowledge based on one assumption and then claim it to be true. Okay. فالمهندس في المقابل المقدس، فالمدنس في المقابل المقدس، فالأصالة مقابل الانتحال، والنفعية مقابل الولاء والخلاص. And therefore, any allegiance or loyalty towards this belief system has nothing to do with belief system. It has more to do with basic instincts about being loyal to the one who's more powerful. And therefore, there is no reference to human agency or ability to proclaim your own past, present, future, and your belief system and knowledge as a whole. We'll stop here for now. If you have any questions, I'll open the mic and for any chatting. I have to admit that this was a very dense session. So يعطيكم العافية. If you are still you survived. Any questions? And I've opened the mic if you have any. But now, when you read the rest of the text, or you reread this article and the next one, which we shall do next Sunday, inshallah, and then we shall also go as well into Hall, what he talks about. In the email, I specified which pages you need to focus about, what Orientalism does and how it is, what are its components. And it's important to understand how Orientalism functions so that you are able to identify it when you come across it, either through the readings or through media. Any questions? you have to continue reading this one. But we reread this article, and then there's the الاستشراقيون الجدد. Okay, it is this one. I'm showing it on the screen. It is this one. It is small text, so you might need to read it from the computer. But basically, it is focuses on the merging between knowledge, institutional knowledge of Orientalism, and positions of power in politics, and how both together make the new Orientalism. Is that who claims monopoly over truth and monopoly over knowledge and monopoly over understanding oneself or one's region. Okay, and also Hull, The West and the Rest. It's a chapter of a book. Let's see if I can. I sent it to you. So we will, inshallah, try to finish those. This is the Shafi'un al-Zubad and Hull, The West and the Rest next Sunday. And the 2 weeks after that, we'll need to do Huntington. Okay. If you have any questions about this session, or just email if you need more explanation. You can arrange a Skype session, or we can arrange something anytime. Okay, but don't go on not understanding. If there is anything, even if you not understand the whole session, talk to me. You are responsible for your understanding of the material, and I'm here to help you understand and come to terms and grapple with the intellectual depth of what we're going through. Okay? I'm unmuting everyone. I noticed that all of us are here, so I'll jot everyone as having attended.